A struggling cowboy spent his last $2 on an unwanted girl, the ending no one expected. It whistled through the rusted fences, rattled the bones of abandoned outposts, and stirred the grit that had settled in every crack of the frontier towns. Out here, at the edge of the galaxy, life was stubborn, slow, and unforgiving, and Elia's crow was even more stubborn. Elias was a cowboy, though not the kind from old Earth stories. He didn't ride horses. He rode hover saddles that hovered over synthetic grasslands, herding synth cattle with their mechanical eyes glinting under the twin suns. It was lonely work, far from the glowing cities that hummed with life, credits, and convenience. Elias liked it that way. Solitude was safer than people, usually, but today solitude weighed heavy. He counted his remaining credits on a greasy counter in a station bar and sighed. $2. That was all he had. Two measly, insufficient credits in a galaxy where a can of food could cost 5. Elias stared at the hollow screen above the bar that showed transport schedules. The orbital station rotated slowly in the sky, tired of spinning, tired of serving anyone who dared stop. His stomach growled. His pockets were empty. And his boots, well, they were just worn out enough to remind him that even in a world where the future had arrived, nothing about frontier life had changed. He was just about to leave when a commotion from the station's processing wing caught his attention. A group of officials in gray uniforms hustled a girl along a narrow corridor. She looked out of place, not because of her clothes, they were simple, but because she was calm, unusually calm. Her eyes, wide and steady, seemed too aware of the world for someone her age. They weren't scared or angry, they just observed as if she understood things that nobody else could. One of the officials barked, "Move along, she's leaving the station. No exceptions." Elias frowned. Most of the people he'd seen at this station were desperate, tired, or angry. But she didn't look desperate, she didn't look tired, and she didn't argue, she just walked. And something about that quiet, deliberate movement told him that she didn't belong here. He stepped closer. "Hey, wait a second, where's she going?" The official shot him a glance, sharp and irritated. "That's not your concern, cowboy, step aside." Elias' hands twitched. He had nothing to lose, and yet somehow he felt a strange pull. It was that instinct he'd learned from years on the plains, the one that told him to act when no one else would. "What if I take her?" he asked. The official laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Take her? You've got 2 credits to your name. 2. You can't even buy a cup of nutrient paste. You can't take her anywhere." Elias didn't answer. He didn't have to. He reached into his pocket, held up the last 2 credits like a challenge. "This is all I got." The official blinked. "You what?" "I said," Elias repeated, "I'll take her, that's my price." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then the official laughed again, harder this time. "2 credits, that's absurd. She's practically unwanted. No one cares about her, and you want to claim her for 2 credits. Fine, take her, if you can." Elias nodded, pretending confidence he didn't entirely feel. The girl turned her head slightly, and for the first time he caught a small smile. It was almost imperceptible, but enough to spark something in him. A promise that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't completely lost his luck. And so, with nothing but 2 credits and a stubborn heart, Elias Crow became the unlikely guardian of a girl who didn't belong. The ride back to the plains was quiet. Elias piloted his hoverbike over the dusty roads that twisted through rust-colored hills. The girl sat behind him, knees drawn close, hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Every so often she spoke. Not much, but just enough to make him realize that she had thoughts, memories, and perhaps even questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "What's your name?" he asked, glancing backward. "Lyra," she replied simply. Elias nodded. "All right, Lyra, that's a good name." They didn't talk much after that. Words weren't necessary. Out here, the plains spoke enough. The wind whispered through the canyon-like hills. The synth cattle bleeped and blinked, their lights flickering under the setting suns. And Elias, who had spent years surviving on hard work and harder silence, felt something strange, a kind of hope. He thought about his past, how he had once been a part of a bustling town, working under corporate contracts, chasing credits that never seemed to stay. He remembered friends he'd lost to accidents, illness, and the cold emptiness of frontier life. And now he thought he had something new, something alive. But Lyra wasn't ordinary. Elias noticed it almost immediately. She didn't flinch at the wind that carried dust like tiny knives. She didn't complain about the cold nights when the suns dipped below the horizon. And when a mechanical beast, the kind designed to test inexperienced herders, wandered too close, she didn't scream. She simply pointed calmly, and the synth cattle adjusted their path. It was as if she understood them better than he ever could. Elias frowned. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "I just know," Lyra said, almost casually. He shook his head. Nothing about her made sense, and yet he felt no fear, only curiosity, and a deeper sense that he had done the right thing. That night they camped near a ridge overlooking the plains. Elias set up a small fire using a solar-powered heater that barely worked in the wind. Lyra sat beside him, watching the sparks float into the dark sky. The stars stretched endlessly, brighter than they had been even on the busiest frontier worlds. "Do you ever wonder if anyone cares about all this?" Elias asked, gesturing at the endless plains, the scattered settlements, the lifeless metal markers of forgotten stations. Lyra turned to him. "I think maybe someone always does, even if they're far away." Her words were simple, but they struck him like a laser through the fog of his tired mind. For the first time in years, Elias allowed himself to believe that someone, or something, out there might notice him, might notice them. The night passed quietly. No storms came. No thieves crept from the shadows. Just the soft hum of the plains, the distant bleep of synth cattle, and the quiet breathing of a girl who was not meant to be there. Elias didn't sleep much. His thoughts swirled. 2 credits, 1 girl. And a decision that on the surface seemed absurd. But he couldn't regret it. Even if he failed, even if the galaxy continued to forget him, he had chosen. He had acted. And out here, in a universe so vast and indifferent, sometimes that was the bravest thing a human could do. Morning arrived slowly. The suns rose over the red horizon, painting the plains in fiery gold. Elias stretched, checking the hoverbike and the supplies they had, meager as always. But Lyra was already moving, her eyes scanning the horizon, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt as if she could read the land itself. "Ready to keep moving?" Elias asked. Lyra nodded. "Yes, we should not stay in one place too long." He frowned. "Why?" "Because some things follow you if you linger," she said cryptically. Elias didn't press. Somehow he knew she would explain when the time was right. For now he focused on keeping the cattle in line, keeping the bike running, keeping the tiny spark of hope alive in his chest. As they rode, dust swirling around them, Elias realized something he hadn't felt in years. Life could still surprise him. And maybe, just maybe, it already had. The plains of Asterin 9 stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, their orange light casting long shadows across rust-colored hills. Elias Crow guided the hoverbike with careful hands, keeping an eye on the wandering synth cattle. Lyra sat behind him, silent but alert, her small hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Despite the early morning chill, her calm presence seemed to warm the space around him. "Where are we heading exactly?" Elias asked, scanning the horizon for a familiar landmark. He had learned to read the land like a map, every ridge and valley etched into his memory. But with Lyra along, he felt as if the world itself had become unfamiliar. "Somewhere safe," she said simply. Her voice was quiet, steady, and carried a strange certainty that made Elias pause. "Safe," he repeated, a dry laugh escaping his lips. "There's no real safe out here. Everything wants to kill you or ignore you or worse, forget you exists." Lyra didn't respond. She only tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. Then after a long moment she spoke. I think humans forget too easily, but I also think humans remember what matters. Elias frowned. Her words were strange, almost like riddles, but he couldn't deny their truth. He had spent years watching the galaxy pass him by. Governments, corporations, and even neighbors all had treated him as invisible, yet he remembered. He remembered every small kindness, every moment of courage, every choice that mattered. He shook his head, trying to focus on the day ahead. All right, Lyra. First, we need to check on the herd. The synth cattle were a curious blend of biology and technology. Their bodies were mostly synthetic, but they had organic cores that required careful care. They moved in predictable patterns, but even a small disruption could cause chaos. Elias' years of experience allowed him to anticipate their actions. But with Lyra watching, he noticed something unusual. A small group of the cattle had begun straying toward a cliff. Normally, he would have shouted or used a signal whip to guide them back. But before he could react, Lyra leaned forward slightly and whispered a single word. Left. Elias hesitated. Then, almost instinctively, he steered the bike in the direction she indicated. The cattle shifted obediently, their glowing eyes aligning with the path. Elias' jaw went slack. How did you? He started, but Lyra simply smiled faintly. I can see patterns, she said. Sometimes it helps to guide them. Elias nodded slowly. There was something about her that didn't fit any explanation he knew. Not a human child, not a synth, not a common refugee. She was something different, something the galaxy had forgotten to explain. The day passed with long hours on the plains, the suns climbing high in the sky and then dipping toward the horizon. Elias shared his limited rations with Lyra, dried protein bars and water. She ate slowly, carefully, never wasting a bite. Do you have a family? Elias asked, trying to make conversation. Lyra shook her head. I never had one. He didn't press. He had learned long ago that some questions were better left unanswered. Instead, he said, You're lucky to be with me then. At least we watch out for each other. She looked at him seriously, her gaze calm but piercing. I'm not sure if lucky is the right word, but I am grateful. Grateful. Elias almost smiled. Gratitude was rare in this part of the galaxy. Most people wanted, demanded, or ignored. Lyra's simple acknowledgement felt like a gift, heavier than any credits he had earned in his life. Night fell quickly, colder than the day had been. Elias found a small canyon and set up their camp. The hoverbike's lights cast long, golden reflections on the rocky walls. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of dust and rust. Lyra helped him set up the small heater and then stood quietly, staring at the stars. They are so many, she whispered, almost to herself. Why does the galaxy feel empty when it has so many stars? Elias chuckled softly. Because most of the time people are too busy surviving to notice them. She tilted her head. And do you notice them? I try to, he said. Not always. But sometimes when the plains are quiet, I look up and think, maybe there's more than just dust and rocks out there. Lyra nodded, almost as if she understood something Elias didn't. There is more, she said. Much more, but humans, they forget or they ignore it. Elias leaned back, staring at the stars. He had spent decades surviving alone, and yet, sitting here beside this strange, unwanted girl, he felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The next day brought a challenge. One of the synth cattle had wandered too close to a ravine. Normally, Elias would chase it down, but he noticed Lyra moving before him. She stepped forward, her hand raised, and called out softly. The herd responded instantly, adjusting their path as if hearing her instructions directly. Elias' jaw dropped. How are you doing that? He asked, running to catch up. I told you I see patterns, she said simply. I can understand how things move, not just humans or animals, but machines too. Elias shook his head. Machines, animals, humans, nothing should obey a child. And yet here she was doing the impossible. You're special, he said, almost without thinking. I don't know what you are, but you're special. Lyra looked at him, her face unreadable. I am not sure if that is good or bad. Elias laughed. It's good, trust me, very good. That afternoon, they came across a small settlement. Most of the buildings were abandoned, half buried in dust. A few stubborn settlers remained, eking out a living with old technology and older courage. Elias guided the herd past the main square, nodding politely to the people who barely looked at them. A man with a weathered face and a crooked smile waved at Elias. Haven't seen a rider in weeks. You bringing more cattle? Elias nodded. Just moving some synths across the plains. Nothing fancy. The man laughed. Well, good luck. Dusty winds and hungry machines are all that's fancy around here. Lyra watched silently, eyes scanning the buildings, the streets, the sky. Elias noticed her alertness but said nothing. He was used to strange behavior from frontier towns. Unusual children didn't surprise him much anymore. As night fell, they camped on the outskirts of the settlement. Elias noticed Lyra staring at an old, rusted communications tower. What are you looking at? He asked. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, it could connect us if we need help or need to be seen. Elias raised an eyebrow. Help seen? Who would see us out here? She shrugged lightly. Someone somewhere. People who remember humans, perhaps, or the stars themselves. Elias laughed softly. The girl's imagination was incredible. He had grown up hearing stories of cosmic civilizations, alien observers, and ancient technologies. And yet out here, surviving on 2 credits and stubborn courage, such stories felt distant and meaningless. But when he looked at Lyra, something about her made him pause. He couldn't explain it. She seemed connected to more than just the dusty plains. Something about her presence suggested that she belonged somewhere bigger, somewhere the galaxy had forgotten but not entirely abandoned. The next morning, Elias woke to find Lyra already awake, scanning the horizon. He rubbed his eyes and asked, "Why are you up so early?" "Time moves differently here," she said, "and some things cannot wait." Elias frowned. "Like what?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pointed toward a distant ridge where the sunlight struck metal in a peculiar way. "There, something waits, something that notices us." Elias squinted, trying to see what she meant. At first, it looked like a pile of old debris, maybe a crashed drone or forgotten satellite. But the light glinted off it in a way that seemed deliberate, almost like it was signaling them. He shook his head. "Probably just old junk." "Sometimes junk is not junk," Lyra said quietly. Elias looked at her. She was so small, so young, and yet her words carried weight he could feel in his bones. He realized that for all her quietness, all her calmness, she was changing the way he saw the world. As they moved toward the ridge, Lyra guided the herd with her subtle gestures. Elias followed, trusting her instincts more than his own. And when they reached the glinting object, they discovered a small device, half buried in the sand. It hummed softly, its lights flickering in a pattern that felt like a message. Elias knelt down, brushing away the dust. "I have no idea what this is." Lyra watched intently. "It is waiting for us, perhaps for me, perhaps for humans, I am not sure." Elias looked at her, feeling a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. The girl he had saved with 2 credits was not just an ordinary child. She was something more, something the galaxy had not yet revealed. And for the first time in years, Elias Crow felt the pull of something larger than survival, something that mattered, something that could change everything. The ridge overlooked a vast expanse of plains, stretching farther than Elias had ever seen. Dust danced across the horizon in shimmering waves, and the twin suns reflected off the metal shards embedded in the earth. The object Lyra had discovered was small, almost insignificant, yet it hummed with a quiet energy that made Elias feel uneasy and intrigued at the same time. He knelt beside it, brushing the red dust with careful fingers. The device's surface was scratched and dented, but the lights pulsed steadily as if alive. Elias frowned. I've never seen tech like this, not even in the city. Lyra crouched beside him, her hands hovering slightly above the device. It knows we are here, she said softly. And it is responding. Elias' brow furrowed. Responding? It's just a pile of old metal. How can it respond? She looked at him with a calm seriousness that made him pause. It is not old, and it is not metal, not really. It is waiting for someone who notices. Elias shook his head, trying to clear the strange feeling in his chest. Someone like you? Lyra nodded slowly. Perhaps, or perhaps humans in general, someone who cares, someone who sees. The words made Elias swallow hard. He was used to surviving alone, to relying only on himself. Yet sitting here with Lyra, he began to understand a truth he had forgotten. In a galaxy so vast, so full of technology, machinery, and stars, being seen and caring for others was more powerful than any weapon. As the afternoon sun climbed, the device's humming grew louder, more insistent. Then, almost suddenly, a holographic projection flickered to life above it. A map of stars, constellations, and systems appeared in shimmering blue light. Lines connected planets, satellites, and strange, unnamed objects scattered across the galaxy. Elias stumbled back, eyes wide. What is that?" Lyra reached forward, touching the projection lightly. "It is a record, a map, a memory. It shows history, long history. Things humans forgot." The hum intensified and a soft voice echoed in Elias' mind, not loud, not words exactly, but more like a feeling. Warmth, curiosity, recognition. He looked at Lyra, whose calm eyes reflected the light of the map. "Do you hear it too?" he whispered. "Yes," she said. "It speaks only to those who notice." Over the next hours, they explored the device's projections. Elias saw planets he had never visited, civilizations he had only heard about in ancient stories, and fleets of ships that once traveled between stars. But most importantly, he saw the humans of the past. They had once been observers, explorers, caretakers of knowledge. They had traveled the galaxy, leaving signals, technology, and records behind. And then they had stopped. "They forgot," Lyra said quietly. "Humans forgot to care. They forgot to notice. They forgot to protect." Elias clenched his fists. He had felt that forgetfulness all his life, the indifference of corporations, the cold efficiency of governments, even the loneliness of the plains. But now, seeing the proof before him, he realized it wasn't just neglect. It was a test, waiting for someone to notice, someone to care again. "Then, what do we do?" he asked. Lyra looked at him with quiet certainty. "We prove that humans remember, that humans can care again. That humans deserve to exist in the galaxy." Elias' heart pounded. The task was enormous, almost impossible. But for the first time he felt a purpose that went beyond mere survival. The galaxy, indifferent and vast, had given him and Lyra a chance to matter. The next day, Elias and Lyra set off across the plains, guided not only by the terrain, but by the strange signals emanating from the device. Every so often, Lyra would pause, pointing to a ridge or a canyon, her instincts guiding them as if she could see invisible threads connecting the stars, the planets, and even the forgotten remnants of civilizations long past. Elias marveled at her abilities. The way she moved, the way she predicted the cattle's reactions, even the way she navigated the dangerous terrain. It was as if she were tuned to the galaxy itself. And slowly, Elias began to realize something. Lyra's abilities weren't just unusual. They were extraordinary. At one point, they came across a cluster of abandoned satellites half buried in the dust. Normally, such remnants were useless, forgotten by time. But when Lyra approached, the lights flickered to life, reacting to her presence. A soft hum filled the air, almost like a song, and Elias felt a thrill run through him. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "They remember, they recognize me, or recognize us." Elias stared in wonder. "Recognize us, but why?" "I am connected," Lyra said softly. "I was not meant to be here, I was left behind, but I am also a signal, a test. And you, Elias, you are part of it too. He shook his head, struggling to understand. Me, I'm just a cowboy. I barely survive day to day. How could I be part of this? She smiled faintly. You care, you noticed me, you acted. That alone is rare enough. As night fell, they set up camp near a canyon where the device's signals were strongest. Elias could not sleep. He sat by the fire, staring into the glowing coals, his mind racing. The galaxy had been indifferent for centuries. Humans had been forgotten, ignored, left to struggle alone. And now, he and a small, unwanted girl had the chance to prove something. He looked at Lyra, who was quietly examining the stars. She had grown strangely familiar, yet still mysterious, like a piece of the universe he was only beginning to understand. "You're not ordinary," he said softly. "I never claimed to be," she replied. "But I can help, and you can help too." Elias nodded, feeling a strange surge of determination. He may not have had much: 2 credits, a worn hoverbike, a handful of supplies, but he had courage, he had choice, and now he had purpose. The following morning, they moved toward a distant ridge where the signals were strongest. Along the way, Elias noticed changes in the environment. Old communication towers flickered to life, satellites in orbit seemed to align, and strange patterns appeared in the dust, like messages left by a civilization long gone. "Do you see that?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "Yes, it is waking, slowly, because you noticed. Because we are here." Elias felt a chill. The implications were enormous. A galaxy that had forgotten humanity was beginning to remember because of them. "And what happens if we fail?" he asked, a knot of fear tightening in his chest. Lyra looked at him calmly. "Then humanity continues to forget. But we will not fail, not now, not when someone finally cares." Elias swallowed hard. He had spent years surviving, scraping by, ignoring the larger universe because it had ignored him. But now, standing beside this girl, he felt a part of something vast, something alive, something that mattered. As they reached the ridge, the device pulsed brighter than ever. A soft light spread across the plains, illuminating long-forgotten patterns etched into the soil, signals, markers, and records left by humans long ago. Elias realized that their ancestors had tried to communicate with the galaxy, had left pieces of themselves behind but had been ignored. And now, with Lyra with him, the galaxy was finally noticing. "It's beautiful," Elias whispered. "Yes," Lyra said softly. "Because humans are beautiful when they care, and you have reminded the galaxy of that." Elias shook his head in awe. He was just a cowboy. He had 2 credits, a worn hoverbike, and a stubborn heart, yet somehow that was enough. Because in a galaxy that had almost forgotten humanity, it was courage, care, and noticing that mattered most. And for the first time in years, Elias Crow understood something he had never truly believed. Even the smallest act of kindness, even the simplest choice, could echo across the stars. The galaxy was waking. And he and Lyra were at the heart of it. The twin suns of Asterin 9 had dipped behind the horizon, leaving the plains bathed in deep orange and shadow. Elias Crow and Lyra sat atop the ridge, staring at the glowing lines etched across the ground by the device. What had once been small sparks of light were now intricate networks, connecting satellites, towers, and ancient markers across the planet. It was as if the land itself had remembered. "This is incredible," Elias murmured, his voice barely louder than the wind. "I've never seen anything like it." Lyra's calm eyes scanned the horizon, reflecting the faint glow of the pulsating patterns. "It is not just incredible, it is a message from the galaxy itself, and we are part of the message now." Elias frowned. "Part of the message?" "I'm just a cowboy, Lyra. What do you mean, part of the message?" She turned to him, her small face serious. "Because you noticed, because you acted. You saved me when no one else would. That simple act, it changed everything. Humanity was about to be forgotten. But your care proved humans can still matter." Elias shook his head. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say he was nothing special, just someone scraping by. But when he looked at the network of lights, the glowing lines spreading across the plains, he realized she was right. Something was waking, something that had slept for centuries. The device hummed and flickered. Then a new image appeared above it, larger, brighter, more complex. It was a holographic face, not human, not animal, but something in between. Its eyes were deep pools of light, and its expression was calm, wise, and a little sad. "You see," Elias whispered. "I see them," Lyra said softly. "They are the observers, the ones who watch civilizations across the galaxy." They were waiting, waiting to see if humans deserved attention again. The face's gaze seemed to settle on Elias. He felt a strange weight pressing on him, not heavy like gravity, but heavy like responsibility. The observers were not angry. They were not hostile. They were simply judging. "You are being observed," Lyra said quietly, "and it is not fearsome. They want to know if humanity can still care, if humans are worthy." Elias' heart pounded. Worthy. How could a man who barely survived, with only 2 credits to his name, prove that humanity was worthy of attention? And yet, when he looked at Lyra, sitting calmly beside him, he understood. It was not about wealth, power, or technology. It was about care, courage, compassion. Over the next hours, the device and Lyra worked together to awaken more of the dormant systems. Towers on the horizon flickered to life, satellites adjusted their orbits, and holographic signals danced across the plains. Elias noticed that every time he acted kindly, every time he guided Lyra safely or protected the synth cattle, the network glowed brighter. "You see," Lyra said, smiling faintly, "your actions, they matter." Elias nodded, still in disbelief. "All of this because of small things I do?" "Yes," she said. "Even the smallest acts can echo across the stars. Humans forget that sometimes." Elias thought back to his life, years of solitude, hardship, and struggle. He had survived by noticing small details, by caring in tiny ways, by never giving up. He had never imagined that such small choices could carry such weight. And yet, here they were, proof in the sky, proof in the devices, proof in the observer's gaze. As night deepened, a soft voice filled the ridge, not from Lyra, not from Elias, but from the device itself. It was warm, calm, almost musical. "You have acted with care. You have noticed. You have chosen compassion over indifference. Humanity may yet be remembered." Elias shivered. The words were not threatening. They were not demanding. They were hope itself speaking. Lyra leaned closer. "They will judge us, Elias, but your actions, they are enough to sway the balance. You have already proved more than any war, any conquest, any credit ever could." Elias' throat went dry. I never thought I could matter." "You do," Lyra said firmly. "All humans matter, but sometimes someone has to show it. That someone was you." The next day, the observer's presence became more tangible. Satellites that had long been dead blinked to life. Communication towers, some of which had not worked for decades, transmitted signals into space. Even old robotic systems in distant settlements activated, their lights flickering in rhythmic patterns that seemed almost musical. Elias watched in awe. "I've never seen the frontier alive like this," he said softly. "It's like the world itself is waking up." Lyra nodded. "It is waking, and not just the world. The galaxy is watching. The observers are preparing to respond." Elias swallowed hard. "Respond how?" "They will return," Lyra said. "Not as enemies, not as conquerors, but as allies. They will watch humanity more closely. They will guide, protect, and remember, but only because you showed them humans can still care." Elias felt a lump in his throat. All his life, he had struggled to survive, unnoticed, unimportant, forgotten. And now the galaxy itself was paying attention. All because he had spent 2 credits on a girl no one wanted. That evening, Elias and Lyra camped beneath the stars once more. The plains were alive with the soft glow of reactivated systems. The device pulsed quietly, its hum like a heartbeat. And above them the sky seemed to shimmer as if the stars themselves were acknowledging them. Elias looked at Lyra. You're incredible, he said. I don't even understand half of what you can do. I am only here because someone cared, she replied. Because you cared. He shook his head, smiling wryly. $2, that's all it cost. Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. $2 and humanity's future. The thought struck Elias with a mix of awe and humility. The smallest act, the most seemingly insignificant choice, had set off a chain reaction that could change the galaxy forever. And he had done it without planning, without strategy, without even knowing what would happen. He had simply acted. The following morning, a change came over the plains. Elias could feel it in the air. The wind carried a different energy, lighter, charged with potential. The synth cattle moved with a sense of awareness he had never seen before. And distant lights flickered across settlements that had long been forgotten, as if awakening from a long sleep. Something big is happening, Elias said. Yes, Lyra said. And it is because humans can still matter, because someone noticed. He looked at her, a profound sense of pride and responsibility settling over him. Then we keep going, we keep showing them what humans can do. Lyra nodded. Exactly, that is all it takes. Care, attention, courage. Humanity will not be judged by strength or technology alone. It will be judged by heart, and your heart is strong. Elias smiled softly. For the first time in his life he felt truly seen. The galaxy, indifferent for so long, was finally acknowledging him, and through him it would acknowledge humanity. As they packed their camp and prepared to move on, Elias realized something. He had never wanted recognition. He had never sought power or fame. But standing here, witnessing the awakening of forgotten systems, feeling the quiet presence of cosmic observers judging humanity, he understood the true power of simple acts. The galaxy was vast, indifferent, often cruel. But even in its vastness, the actions of one human, one choice, one moment of care could echo across the stars. And Elias Crow, a struggling cowboy who had spent his last 2 credits on an unwanted girl, had done exactly that. The galaxy had taken notice. Humanity had taken its first step toward remembrance. And the story of a small act of kindness was about to become a legend that no one, least of all Elias, had expected. The plains of Asterin 9 glowed softly under the twin suns, their light reflecting off the activated satellites and towers that now dotted the landscape. Elias Crow and Lyra stood atop a small hill, surveying the land that had transformed around them in ways he could barely comprehend. The frontier world that had once seemed empty and indifferent now felt alive, vibrant, remembered. Elias shifted on his boots, letting out a long breath. I still can't believe it, he said. All of this because of me, because of 2 credits. Lyra looked at him with her calm, knowing eyes. It was never just the credits, Elias. It was your choice. You could have walked away, ignored me, left me to be forgotten. But you didn't. That is what matters, he smiled, shaking his head. I was just trying not to starve. Her lips curved into a small, warm smile. Sometimes survival is the beginning of something greater. In the following days, Elias and Lyra traveled across the plains, visiting settlements, old stations, and clusters of synth cattle that had been part of his work for decades. Everywhere they went, the land itself seemed to acknowledge them. Drones long inactive hummed back to life. Communication towers blinked to signal distant outposts. Even the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if aware of their small but powerful journey. Elias watched, stunned, as ordinary tools of the frontier, the machines he had ignored, the broken technology he had accepted as dead, responded to Lyra's presence and to his simple care. He realized that the galaxy had not forgotten humans entirely. It had only waited for someone to prove that humanity still had heart. Look at this, he said one afternoon, pointing to a field of synth cattle that had once been sluggish and disorganized. Now they moved in perfect harmony, guided by subtle signals only Lyra seemed to notice. They are remembering, Lyra said, or perhaps learning from us. Elias nodded slowly. He had spent years guiding cattle and surviving in solitude, but he had never imagined that such ordinary acts could ripple outward and touch something so vast, so important. One evening, as they rested near a canyon, a strange phenomenon unfolded. The lights from satellites and towers merged into a radiant glow that spread across the plains, forming intricate patterns. It was as though the world itself was mapping their journey, recording every choice, every act of care. Elias stared in awe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "The world is alive." "Yes," Lyra said softly, "because humans matter, because you showed care when no one else would. The galaxy remembers now, and it will watch, learn, and protect, but only if we continue to care." Elias thought about his life, the years of loneliness, struggle, and uncertainty. He thought about every small choice he had made to survive, every act of kindness he had offered even when it went unnoticed. And now, he realized that those small acts had prepared him for this moment, the moment when the galaxy itself would recognize the worth of humans. The following morning, the first signs of cosmic acknowledgement became visible. Strange ships appeared on the horizon, not threatening but hovering with a soft luminescence. Their shapes were unfamiliar, elegant, and otherworldly. They did not attack. They did not demand tribute. Instead, they observed. Elias felt a tremor of awe and fear. "They're real," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "The observers have returned. They came because someone cared, because someone proved that humanity can still matter." The ships hovered silently, scanning the land, the technology, and the people below. Elias noticed subtle patterns in their light, a language of acknowledgement that he could not fully understand but could feel deeply. The galaxy was watching, judging, and learning. And humanity's fate, once uncertain, was now tied to the actions of one cowboy and an unwanted girl. Days passed, and the frontier became a beacon of hope. Settlements long isolated received guidance through the activated towers. Supplies were redistributed, synth cattle thrived, and technology previously considered useless sprang to life. Word began to spread across neighboring systems of the miraculous awakening. People spoke of a cowboy who had spent his last 2 credits on a girl and had changed the galaxy itself. Elias listened to the stories quietly. He never sought fame, and he never wanted it. Yet he felt something far deeper, pride in what simple acts could accomplish. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Elias turned to Lyra. "Do you think this will last, that the galaxy will really remember us?" Lyra's gaze was steady. "Yes, because now humans have shown that they care, and caring, that is the foundation of everything." "The galaxy will not forget again," Elias smiled. "So $2 really did change everything," she laughed softly. $2 and one brave choice. Weeks later, Elias and Lyra returned to the plains where he had first met her. The ridge where the device had activated was now a place of glowing symbols, humming with energy. It was no longer just a ridge, it was a monument, alive and responsive. Elias felt a strange mix of humility and wonder. He had never imagined that a choice made out of desperation could create such profound change. And yet, here it was. Humanity's chance had been awakened by 2 simple acts, noticing and caring. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than survive, Elias. You have reminded the galaxy what humans can be. That is a legacy far greater than any credit, any job, or any frontier heroics." Elias nodded quietly. "And it all started because I didn't walk away from someone no one wanted. I didn't walk away from you." She smiled, her calm eyes reflecting the twin suns. "Exactly, that is the power of small choices." As the months passed, Elias continued his work as a cowboy, herding synth cattle across the plains. But everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer indifferent. Distant stars, satellites, and observers kept watch, subtly guiding and protecting humanity's settlements. Supplies arrived where they were needed, and technology once lost was restored. And among all this, Lyra stayed by Elia's side, not because she had to, but because she chose to. People began to tell stories of Elia's crow, the cowboy who had spent his last 2 credits on an unwanted girl, and of Lyra, the girl who was not meant to exist but whose presence awakened the galaxy. Children listened wide-eyed, and adults whispered with awe. But Elias did not seek recognition. He continued to live simply, quietly, and with purpose. One evening, as he and Lyra sat on a ridge watching the glow of the awakened world below, Elias said softly, "I never thought I could do something so important." "You did," Lyra said. "Because you cared, and because you acted when no one else would." Elias looked at her, and for the first time he understood the truth that had guided them both. It was not wealth, power, or skill that mattered most in the universe. It was courage, compassion, the choice to act for others, even when it seemed impossible. The galaxy continued to hum and shine, a living testament to the power of small acts. And somewhere, far beyond the twin suns, observers recorded the story of a human and a girl who had reminded the universe that humanity could still matter. Elias and Lyra walked among the plains, the glow of activated systems lighting their path. The air was filled with soft energy, the subtle recognition of a galaxy that had been waiting for someone to care. And though he still had only 2 credits in his pocket, Elias felt richer than anyone who had ever ruled a planet or commanded a fleet. Because he had learned the most important truth: one small act of kindness could echo across the stars. One brave choice could awaken an entire galaxy. And one person, no matter how ordinary they seemed, could change the course of history. Elias glanced at Lyra, who smiled up at him. "So what do we do next?" he asked. "We continue," she said. "We live, we care, we act. That is all it takes to keep humanity remembered." Elias laughed softly, feeling the warmth of purpose fill him. "Then let's keep walking, Lyra. There's a lot of galaxy to care for." Together they walked across the plains, the twin suns setting behind them, the glow of awakened systems lighting their way. 2 lives, 1 choice, and a galaxy that would never forget. All because a struggling cowboy had spent his last $2 on a girl no one wanted. And the ending no one expected, was just the beginning.